So that's one. The International Seabed Authority, the ISA, which is mandated by a 1982, I believe, UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, to govern and make regulations in a place called the area. The area is territorial, well, waters that belong to no jurisdiction, no country. So there's a body that regulates happenings in this place, the area. The ISA, as I said, is headquartered down by the Jamaica Conference Center, and every so often, the executive would meet here in Kingston to discuss happenings. So since, well, recently, a country called Nauru sponsored a metallics company based in Canada, a Canadian company, because I want to get into it, but it requires countries, there are certain rules within the ISA that says countries or developing states have, just to make things fair, for a company to mine the deep sea, they have to be sponsored by one of these countries. So Nauru sponsored a Canadian company to exploit or to explore the deep sea. The ISA has a 2-year rule. So once a country indicates and say, hey, we're going to know, we want to start doing this, they have a 2-year rule where they must put things into motion to start the regulations or the rules to properly govern deep sea mining. So Nauru expressed an interest in the deep sea in 2021. So the ISA had up until 2023 summer to make sure regulations are in place so deep sea can be facilitated. So that is why we are here, all right? So that is the reason that kind of led to the many discussions and meetings where countries, executives are coming to Jamaica and having this meeting by the Jamaica Conference Center. Deep sea mining, or let me just put it in context, what the actual thing will look like. So there are some potato-sized nodules, and there's an exhibition there. As soon as I'm through at the end of the conference, you can just take a look and just see what that nodule is. A polymetallic nodule, the size of my palm. They get a little bit bigger, potato-sized, right? So these polymetallic nodules are found at specific regions. Thank you, Felix. So this is a rare moment, by the way, because these are found 4,000 to 6,000, I believe, meters below the surface of the water. So not everybody has a chance to actually touch one or feel one. So I would encourage you all to touch it and just feel it because it's a rare experience, right? So this potato-sized polymetallic nodule is formed at the bottom of the ocean, of the deep sea, not everywhere, specific regions. And it's thought that the metals are, what should I say, synthesized or formed around smaller nodules or nucleus. Sometimes the teeth of fish and sharks, granules, bones, corals, and it takes millions of years to reach to a point of this. Millions of years. I know that some of us can't conceptualize millions of years, but as a geologist, we speak in these terms, thinking about millions of years. This is a long time, right? Many of us, I don't think anyone here is 100 years old, but I mean, to live, we can't think beyond that. Think about millions of years for something this size to be formed, right? So there are hundreds of thousands of these things on the bottom of the ocean floor. The thing is, they are rich in metals like nickel, copper, cobalt, all right? And it would make sense if we were able to get them to use them for things that we need, like our smartphones and so on, all right? So the persons who are wanting to mine these metals are saying that they need these metals or these nodules to drive the green revolution, to drive energy transition. because these metals and minerals we are running out of the quality on land. So we need to go to the deep where we know nothing about to get these metals and these minerals. So they are developing prototypes, a little machine, like a vacuum. A ship will be on top. There are also illustrations there that extends these material, this machine, like a vacuum cleaner, onto the ocean floor, 4,000 to 6,000 meters down. And this machine would run across the ocean floor, back and forth for kilometers upon kilometers, hundreds of square kilometers, just rummaging and digging up the sand just to get at these nodules. These nodules are suctioned through a pipe onto the sea floor, onto the sea, the water line, into ships, where they are separated from the unwanted. The unwanted, mind you, are the organisms that are within the ocean, within the sand or the mud at the bottom, the organisms that rely on this to live and to survive, because there are complex ecosystems or sub-ecosystems around, or habitats around these nodules individually on the ocean floor. So when they put those to a waste and they separate the good stuff, they take them off and process them, I'd imagine, and then flush or release whatever gang or the waste back into the water column. So plumes of sand and dust will be released into the ocean columns, will be able to travel miles upon miles. That's an environmental disaster in itself. But Jamaica is here where their mining is miles away. That's true. Jamaica is in the Caribbean, and where they're hoping to mine is an area between Japan and the west coast of Mexico. Right, the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, I believe it's called, where these things are found in abundance. But we know that by now that climate change is not a localized event. It's not going to happen in one part and the other parts of the world is good. As a matter of fact, Jamaica as a small island developing state, and all other small island developing states, should be the most alarmed, because as small island developing states, SIDS, we are at the tip of the spear when it comes to climate change and the effects of climate change. And we're also the least likely to be able to adapt because we're under-resourced, we're poor. We can't afford adapting and mitigating. But when these industrialized countries are able to, through their companies, private companies or bilateral relationships, are able to, again, do these activities that will cause havoc in the climate and so on, we are the ones who are going to feel it first and feel it the hardest and harshest. And we're not going to have any resources to fight against it or to challenge it. So we have to speak out now. We have to take care and look at what is happening. We have to ask questions as to what are the environmental regulations, what are the effects. Do we know enough about the deep sea for us to be doing something, make a mistake twice, because we've made it once with mining on land, and we know of the social and economical impacts mining has in Jamaica, in parts of Africa. Right? So do we want to replicate what we have been doing on land in the deep sea, where one, we can't get to readily, we need machines to get there, two, we don't know enough about. And the enough we don't know about might be useful more than these polymetallic nodules to drive the green revolution. The green revolution, the energy transition as they're touting, it's something that we want as environmental scientists, but what are the means to get to this? There are questions like, have we thought about properly recycling the metals that we have used already before we get to new metals? Have we thought about changing systems and, changing systems that require these metals? We now have to think about, how we go about changing society, changing ways of lives before we go about disturbing an undisturbed area. So that is deep sea mining in a nutshell, and that is why we are here today, to ask questions, to say what is it that Jamaica. We also want a bit of transparency as well. You know, Jamaica is one of those countries. By the way, since 2022 April, there have been 33 contracts given out by the ISA to explore, not exploit, explore to see what is there. 31. Each of these contracts had to have the countries give a sponsor to these companies. So Jamaica is one of those countries that have sponsored a company to start exploring the deep sea. And as Jamaican citizens, we are not told a lot about what this contract entails. We're not sure who will be held liable if this company does something wrong to mess up the ocean. Is it the people, taxpayers, the Jamaican government? Who will be held liable? We as Jamaicans should be asking of our leaders what is within this contract and why is it not made public, or at least parts enough made public. We need greater participation as Jamaicans to say what is happening in the deep sea, what is Jamaica's involvement, right? These are the questions that we're asking at the JCCYC as activists. These are the questions I want the youth here, I think it's Old Harbour High School that's here, right, to ask of themselves and their peers and their teachers, geography teachers, science teachers, biology, physics, chemistry. Right, there are a lot of materials online to read upon. They're lengthy if you don't want to read upon. Turn on a podcast. There are podcasts on deep sea mining. Just turn it on and leave it running while you do your homework, or on TikTok. Just turn it on to YouTube, just listening to this content. It's important for us to learn bit sizes. I mean, you're here, make the best of the opportunity to ask questions, to learn more. Even if you never read an article on deep sea again, at least learn something today about deep sea. And when it's in the news, you will say, well, I went to a conference or exhibition about deep sea. Let me, stop a minute and hear what's been happening. All right, so I want to wrap up now. I've been going on for quite a long time. So those are the questions that we have, and what I want to bring to you today at today's conference from the JCCYC. I want to thank you all for listening. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gishan, for such an immersive context on deep sea mining and its impacts. And as we inch closer towards the panel discussion, I'm sure that a lot of what Gishan would have raised are some of the things that we want to pull and also bring into the conversation. Now, he said a lot, but I want to see if you're paying attention. What is the name of the pebble and I don't want the science people, so no panelists or exhibitors can answer. The pebble that Gishan showed us that he spoke about is a rare experience, and I think that's what it's all about. And it contains the minerals that the miners are after. What's it called? What's the name? All right. I'm going to refer to the judges. Manganese modules, I think that's also acceptable. And what's the other name? No, Gishan, you can't answer. You give the presentation. I don't understand this. All right. Can we have a non-Gishan response, please? All right, student from Old Harbour High. So manganese nodules and polymetallic nodules, not modules. Nodules, okay, all right. So I'm happy that you're paying attention. And another question I'm going to sneak in. He mentioned the underwater structures, the hydrothermal vents, and we have one closely located to Jamaica. The name of a country. No, your answer already. Is that I'm gonna get a prize for you. Anybody else who can remember the name or the location of the underwater structure he mentioned that's in relatively close proximity to Jamaica? Right. It's not Cayman Islands. It's a Cayman Trench, for being technical. I'm just kidding. Okay, but I'm happy that you're paying attention. Is it definitely the Cape? Is it in the Cayman Islands? We'll say the Cayman Trench. So great. I'm happy that we're all following the conversation. All right, at this time, we're going to invite our panelists to join us at the discussion table. Mrs. Lalita Mattis Davis from the UWI Faculty of Law, Christopher Corbin representing UNEP, Davia Hilton from the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, and Robin Young from SOA Caribbean. All right, so I'm also gonna relocate. Can I have some, can we move the podium? I'm gonna move the podium to the side. Right, take the mic with me. Okay. All right. So before we get into the conversation, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and let us, okay, the introduction first, and then we start with the questions. And I'm going to begin at my extreme end with Mrs. Lalita Mattis Davis. So introduce yourselves first, and then we're gonna come around with the first line of questions.
Thanks. I'm Lalita Davis Mattis. I'm the university's general counsel and also lecturer in the Faculty of Law right here at Mona.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Corbin. I'm the coordinator with the United Nations Environment Program, Cartagena Convention Secretariat, based right here in Kingston, Jamaica. Dare I say based in the same building as the ISA, but downtown. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Davia Hilton, co-lead of the Research, Policy Development, and Advocacy arm of the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Young, and I am the Projects and Administrative Coordinator for SOA Caribbean. It stands for Sustainable Oceans Alliance.
All right, thank you, panelists. Now, I'm actually going to start with Christopher. And then, interesting fact, he mentioned that basically neighbors with the UN ISA, International Seabed Authority. So let's talk a bit more about the environmental implications of large-scale deep-sea mining. What concerns does the UNEP share in that regard? And did you invite in, like, knock them up and say, hey, guys?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. And I think in the context setting this morning done by our colleague there, he touched upon some of the key aspects of deep sea mining which have the potential to have significant environmental impacts and impacts in our oceans. So the area of prospecting, just finding out what's there, the actual exploration efforts in terms of movement of equipment, the exploitation itself, and then I would dare say an activity which we haven't reached in a deep sea mining context but are familiar with regard to land mining, the issues associated with closure. So at all of those steps there is a potential for impacts, environmental impacts. One could argue that it's the actual exploitation or mining where the impacts are going to be most significant. And just to complement, I think, on some of the earlier context setting, potentially irreversible loss of the substrate that we are talking about. We are working a little bit in a vacuum of not having a lot of the scientific information in terms of what are those ecosystems? What's the relationship with those ecosystems? How are those interacting with ecosystems within the coastal and marine environment? So a lot of the activities that were mentioned in terms of the plumes, in terms of the discharges, in terms of the physical alteration, all have the potential for impacting on our coastal and marine ecosystems, impact of noise, impact of light, potential impact of toxic metals. And as I had the privilege of looking at some of the artifacts, there's also a cultural heritage that we have to be concerned about. So the potential impacts are significant. And there is certainly a need for us to have a better understanding of what those might be.
All right, thank you. Lots to explore there, Chris, but as we proceed, we will get into that. I want to dial back to my other panelists. Your initial thoughts on deep sea mining. I'm going to go with Robin. Tell us about that.
Thank you so much for that question. I mean, in my opinion, it is just the classic prevention is better than cure. We need to stop this industry from even starting. It can start as soon as July of this year. And if we don't raise enough awareness and if we don't share enough information, this industry can start, and it's very hard for it to stop. The ocean obviously does not have any physical borders. There are no lines, there are no boundaries. So it affects everyone, and it affects our livelihoods, especially here in the Caribbean, where most of our livelihood is destined around the ocean. So deep seabed mining, not a good idea. I don't think we need these things that they say we need. And it's important for us, especially in the Caribbean, to be aware of what's happening, and so we can stand as one, we can unite, and that we can stop this industry before it starts.
All right, Gabriel.
My initial response to this was complete and utter heartbreak. We are in the midst of climate crisis, climate disaster. Everything that you can imagine is going wrong with our climate. And as a small island developing state that Jamaica is, we are the people that need more protections against climate change. We're the people that should be fighting for our environment. And at this stage, to introduce a new industry on top of the ones we already have and are not regulating properly, to introduce a new industry, a new exploitative industry, a new extractive industry in such a unique, delicate ecosystem as the deep sea was absolutely insane to me upon hearing it. I thought it was make-believe. You're going all the way down there where we can't even, our bodies cannot process down there the intense amount of pressure, the extreme darkness, the amount of machinery that you need just to be able to get there, the huge investments of money that you need to start off. You're saying that that's going to be profitable, and that profit is more important than our planet, because the ocean is one of the largest ecosystems, but also it helps with climate regulation. So even if we were to change to renewable energies today, we would still need a huge carbon sink, and that's what the ocean provides. So how is it that you're saying you're trying to move towards a green future and you're going to disrupt that large carbon sink that we have naturally with the oceans?
All right, and Lalita, also asking your initial thoughts on the deep sea mining industry.
All right, but first of all, let me thank you for welcoming me here. And secondly, how happy I am to actually see young people advocating on these subject matters, right? So generally, though, I think there are some clear areas of concern with deep seabed mining. And I think those areas have also been articulated by other experts, including experts who also sit within the International Seabed Authority itself. I think one of the major issues has to do with the unknown, what we don't know. And there is a principle in international environmental law termed the precautionary principle that really underpins this discussion. And really, in essence, what it says is, in the absence of clear scientific evidence, you should really err on the side of caution. However, there are different ways of articulating and implementing the principle itself. And so different countries interpret it in different ways. And certainly, when you look at what we term the mining code, now the mining code, if you go online and you look for the mining code under the International Seabed Authority's website, as Chris said, it's really the composite of all the regulations governing prospecting, exploration, and mining. So we are at this stage now where we believe, or there is a belief that there is perhaps sufficient information to mine, based on, by the way, our high levels of consumerism as people in the global space. The truth is, COVID has taught us that if you take us out of this space, the environment will thrive. Though we are in this space, we need equipment, we are going into clean development mechanisms, we need new minerals, we need new metals. Now, based on the wonderful introduction that you gave, and I don't want to be too long, you really have raised some fundamental issues. And if these are issues of fact, if we don't need these things, then the real answer is, then why proceed? Then the other question is, do you need it now? Are you going to need it later? So I'm putting that out as well. And I want to give a very, very close example here, and that's the cockpit country. And we talk about land mining. And I raise it because a few years ago, there was a moratorium placed on mining in the cockpit country. But now we are at this stage where we are looking towards exploitation of the bauxite in the country, in the cockpit country. And so what you do with land mining is that you establish protected areas, you establish buffer zones, etc. When you look at the exploitation regulations, the concepts are there, and there are other mechanisms that are engaged with a view to protecting the marine environment. And I also want to say that, remember, this element of the Law of the Sea Convention is one component, and there are other obligations. The protection of the marine environment is a very critical part of the Law of the Sea Convention. So, just in introduction, I think we must explore the areas, we must determine whether or not deep seabed mining is a necessity. And not just a necessity, whether or not you need it ever at all. But if you will ever need it, then the discussion is going to happen in the next couple of years. So I think the discussion on deep seabed mining now, what is there, what is not there. The truth of the matter is, I used to say to my students, you will never go anywhere near the deep seabed where this is. The closest you get is on a transatlantic flight from Jamaica somewhere else. So it seems far away, but then the issue of climate change is again important. We don't see glaciers, but the melting of the glaciers impact us as well. So I think these are real issues that we need to discuss, and I am of the view that I think we need to employ the precautionary principle in a more robust way when it comes on to deep seabed mining. In other words, if we need more science, then get more science. And that's my introduction. Thank you.
All right. So I think the global collective consciousness, especially when we think about the climate and environment, of course, is that extractive industries is what has gotten us to this point, where now we have to be mobilizing to mitigate against climate change. So, but it's the irony is that we're moving from mining on land to now mining at sea, which, as Davia mentioned, one of the largest ecosystems, and of course, the ocean the ocean plays a significant role in relation to mitigating climate change, the largest carbon sink, and of course the nutrients, and we all know the benefits. So it's a big irony. And of course, in the conversation here and elsewhere, we speak about this suitably regulatory framework not yet in place. And I do know that Lolita mentioned, of course, the precautionary. We want to get a bit more in that for our understanding. But what I'm getting at, there are other concerns in a lot of spaces about the ISA being fit for purpose. So considering all of this, we don't know the implications of deep sea mining. We are not convinced that sufficient research has been conducted, and of course questions about the necessity of deep sea mining. So why is it that a UN body, has seen, question, before I even tangle myself further, let's stick to that topic about asking your thoughts on whether or not the ISA is fit for purpose, considering everything that we're digesting in relation to deep sea mining. All right, Davia wants to go.
Well, perhaps Lolita can shed some light.
And it's an open question, so of course let us know if you'd want to tackle the question as well.
My personal opinion is that they aren't, because if you are an authority on the seabed, then I think your priority would be to protect the seabed, the seafloor, but they seem to be prioritizing the division of it over the protection of it. So they are now being overseers into who gets to mine the deep sea as opposed to should we mine the deep sea. So right now they have issued 30 licenses to mine. So each of these licenses is from a company that has to get sponsorship from any country that is signed on to the convention, including Jamaica, who sponsored Blue Minerals Jamaica to mine in July 2023 with everyone else. Now, if we say we don't have the science, and if we say even with the science, we would still be, embargaining on a huge risk, then how is it that an authoritative body could possibly make that decision, especially right now? So I would say no, that's my personal opinion, but we have other opinions here. Let me hear them.
Okay, so I agree with what you're saying, except to say the issue of whether or not the ISA is fit for purpose or not, I would say it is fit for purpose, because what it really does is so the ISA under Part 11 has a responsibility over the area. And remember, all states parties to the convention form part of the assembly. So all states who are parties to the Love the Sea Convention, including some who are observers, are part of the discussion. So the discussions regarding deep seabed mining is not the remit of the people who sit in the office downtown, just to be clear on that. So it's really a discussion of states parties, including Jamaica, right, that has a robust delegation that goes to meetings. And so that's the first thing. So the question really is, what is the role of the International Seabed Authority over this area? Because remember, you have other elements of the Love the Sea Convention that we interface with every day. We have territorial waters, etc., how you negotiate boundaries. So there are many, it's a very involved convention. And actually, it's dubbed the Constitution of the Oceans, because everything else internationally that touches and concerns the oceans, the Love the Sea Convention is a reference point. So is the ISA fit for purpose? I would say yes, because it is actually carrying out its role in terms of examining the role of seabed minerals and its interface with us on land, and the extent to which humankind needs these resources. Now, what we're having a discussion here is whether or not humankind actually needs these resources. At the end of the day, it may be that the mining code will never be implemented. So what you will end up with would be information on prospecting, exploration, so we know what's there. Those two processes, those two antecedents would have determined for us what we have and clearly what is commercially viable. Because if it wasn't commercially viable, then we would not be proposing mining. So yes, the ISA is fit for purpose, it's doing its work. How it does its work is another issue. There have been concerns about the openness of the discussions, etc., and steps are actually being taken to have more involvement. Now, the other areas that I want us to focus on as well, and apart from being precautionary, is the notion of the common heritage of mankind. So we had discussions about who pays for any damage to the seabed, because Jamaica is a sponsoring state. So the role of the sponsoring state is really to ensure that the regulations are complied with. But we're not out there. We are here in Jamaica. Whichever ministry is involved, whether it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Mining, we are here. We are not out there on the cruises. We're not doing that. So we are relying on the contractors to do their work. And all these are by contract. So these persons have contracts with very clearly defined terms. Enforcement clearly is an issue. You're not there, so you're actually reliant on. That also happens on land, right? That also happens on land. You have a sewage treatment plant, I don't know what's going out, I'm relying on you to give me the information unless I go out there and do my testing myself. The difference is where the minerals are, and we know that human beings can't access. So the common heritage of mankind really says, that those minerals, that we must all benefit. That's what it actually means. It means that whatever comes up for processing, that there is a way for humankind to function, to benefit, and there's also the notion of developing countries benefiting as well. So the role of developing countries in the air is also very important, because you mentioned Nora, I think it was, or Tonga, right? So it's very important, and the fact that Jamaica as well has signed have arrangements with Blue Minerals Jamaica. It says that Jamaica as a singular
Owen? Yeah.
point. I hope you can hear me. So Jamaica is currently the only Caribbean country that has singularly signed an agreement. Cuba has always been apart because they are a part of another group of countries. So they have been at the table for a very long time. But the discussions regarding whether mining or not, I think, is a discussion that will continue. And by the way, you mentioned the issue of biodiversity. Remember now, there's also another discussion on biodiversity beyond areas of national jurisdiction. So the matters relating to biodiversity in these areas that you can't see, the need for us to understand, because even with that has to also redound to the common heritage of mankind. Because it's not in any area that anyone exercises jurisdiction over. So there are also other discussions about protecting that biodiversity that is in the same area that you will have deep sea bed mining. So it's a real issue. When you look at the regulations, what the regulations are seeking to do, and I'm not commenting on whether or not it will work or not, but what the regulations are actually seeking to do is to mitigate some of the issues, to address some of these uncertainties, and I think we also need to look more critically and to critique those different elements in order for us to have a more, a more comprehensive understanding and approach. Because yes, we know that there are uncertainties, but how are the regulations purporting to address these risks? Because they are risks. And so I think Chris mentioned the notion of irreversible. Now, if there's irreversible harm, I mean, the term is self-explanatory. You can't rehabilitate. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have. And it is very clear from the discussion here and from the discussion from experts globally that we have not answered the questions. And so the fact that we have not answered the questions, the other question is, do we halt the discussions? Do we say no to deep seabed mining? Do we say we need more information, and if we receive the information, then perhaps we can move forward? Do we employ the precautionary principle strictly by saying there is no scientific certainty, and therefore, being precautionary, we're going to say no?
Okay, thank you. So it's clear from the points and the perspectives that have been tabled from our panelists so far that these issues are vast. But at the end of the day, when we push for public awareness and understanding, especially within localized spaces, people want to know, how does it affect me? How does it affect my country? And I know Gishan mentioned, of course, that all eyes will be on Jamaica simply because, the ISA is headquartered here. So a lot of people are asking the question, how do the issue of deep sea mining, how might this affect Jamaica or the Caribbean region? Christopher, I think I want to have you start of the responses.
I wanted to perhaps start a little bit by building on what Lolita said in the context of all of these organizations, including the ISA. They are made up of member states. They are made up of all of us as countries, and therefore, in evaluating whether any of these organizations are fit for purpose, it's important that the governments that make up those organizations also put forward all of the issues that don't just represent one particular delegate, but represent a government position. And that's where I think activities such as this and raising awareness and advocacy is so critical to the debate that then takes place. As we were speaking, I actually took the opportunity of looking at the at the ISA website. And frankly, it was the first two statements I think are very relevant and maybe can help us in assessing, is it doing what it should do? Are we doing as countries what we should do to influence the discussions? It says that, first of all, it's made up of 167 countries, member states, so it's global. It's mandated under a legal convention, the Law of the Sea, and it's to organize, regulate, and control all mineral activities in the seabed area. For me, most importantly, for the benefit of all. So it's supposed to have, as was mentioned, that aspect of common heritage. The second paragraph, I think, is even more pointed because it says the ISA has the duty to ensure the effective protection of the marine environment from harmful effects that may arise from any deep seabed activity. So it's there, it's part of their mandate. Now, whether or not collectively they are being asked to make sure that this is enforced, I think now this is where the advocacy role, the role of media, the role of the delegates who represent in the discussion, that these points have to come forward.
I'm just going to piggyback off what you said. The ISA it's in a very conflicting position, very compromising in my opinion, meaning they are to regulate activities that goes on in the deep sea, and then they also have the role of protecting and ensuring that our biodiversity isn't affected in any way. In relates to how it affects the Caribbean, as I had mentioned before, you know, the Caribbean, especially Jamaica and Trinidad, and well, everyone, it affects all of us. Our destinies are inherently entwined with the ocean, with tourism, fishing, most of our economic well-being is based in the ocean. For scuba divers like myself, I'd love to dive and see all the pretty things, and you know, we'd love to explore more and, you know, put more research out there. But if deep sea bed mining does happen, most of that won't be a thing anymore, and you know, we aren't the ones that are going to see the benefits. Our children and our great-grandchildren, is for the generations to come. So right now, the youth and everyone has to get involved to put this thing to a stop, because we would love for future generations of the Caribbean and of the wider world to see what it is that we are seeing.
Thank you, Robin. And as you touched on the youth and future generations, I want to also throw that out to our panelists. Davia, I'm going to have you come in as well. The concerns for the youth in relation to deep sea mining, what are your perspectives on that?
I think I speak for the youth when I say that we are very concerned. Each time that we have these meetings happening at the ISA in Jamaica, there are people that turn up to protest with us, and these people are youth. We are a youth group. It's the youth that are having this conversation, that's starting this conversation. I've only heard of it from us and from within us, and then with other groups carrying along with us. But really, it's us knowing that it is our future, or Monica on the JCCYC, is that we are the generation that has to live climate change, because we know that we are the ones that are concerned about it. It's said that millennials and younger are more concerned about the planet than where they're living, like in terms of having a house, paying rent, all of that. They would rather be homeless and fighting for the climate as opposed to building a life for themselves as generations before us had. Mostly because the economy is what it is right now. But so we know that these exploitative industries have never been helpful towards us. So I keep getting tripped up on the benefits for all that you're referring to, that the ISA is purporting, because really when they try to I don't want to say pretend, but when they try to make it seem as if the division of the resources is trying to keep developing nations, third world countries in mind, like ours, and giving us preference for access to the minerals, or choosing Jamaica as the headquarters, it doesn't really seem as if you're doing it for the benefit of us. It feels like another type of exploitation, where you come to us with half information and let us vote against our own self-interest to go mine a region that we wholeheartedly depend on as an island, and then further turning in us into colonizers to go mine another region that Pacific Islanders have been activizing and protesting for a decade. I only found out about this last year, so we've only been protesting for a couple of months. Pacific Islanders have been against this from the start 10 years ago when they tried in Papua New Guinea. So for us to get up and try to go in another region and invade that region to do something that they are wholeheartedly against, to me, you asked how it's going to affect Jamaica. It's affecting our very soul, on top of our physical or financial or lives and our livelihoods. It's everything. It affects us, and the youth know it.
All right. Thanks for that response, Davia. So before I come back, because there are some specifics I maybe want to ask Krista and the rest of the panelists, even in relation to Jamaica, implications for coastal communities and, as it relates to ecosystem changes that may come about with deep sea mining. But before I do this, I want to pause to speak to you, the audience, to remember that you're part of this conversation. So I hope that you're following. I hope that you have your questions. And especially if it is that there are points that you hear that you don't fully understand, or there are things that you have not heard in the discussion that you would like to see come out, please get those questions ready. I think we have our representatives from the JCCYC so that we can regulate the Q&A discussion when that segment comes up. But please ensure that you're following and you have your questions, because it's very important that we arm ourselves with the information here. Now, so many things to pull from. I remember, Chris, you mentioned, so before I go back to the community and the local level impacts, Chris, you mentioned that awareness and advocacy is very critical to the debate. I note, of course, that we have some media representatives here, so I want to say thank you as well for coming out. Let's talk about the role of the media in this discussion. I know JCCYC, through your Environmentally Speaking podcast, so that's a plug to subscribe, that you did ask the question, why is no one speaking about deep sea mining? Do you believe, panelists, that enough is being done by media houses to raise awareness and hold representatives accountable? Who wants to take the first go at that? All right, Robin. Do you believe enough is being done by media houses to raise awareness and hold representatives accountable?
The truth is, you can Google deep seabed mining right now, and it's a plethora of articles and pictures, and the information is out there. In relation to Jamaica, however, I understand that deep seabed mining is not as easy to document as, say, pollution, where we can see the effects or we can smell the garbage or whatever the case may be. Deep seabed mining is so specific and it's so intricate that, it is kind of out of touch. So in terms of media, especially in Jamaica, I do not believe enough is being done. I'm sure this is probably the first time some of you are hearing about deep seabed mining at all, or maybe you glance it in passing in social media. So it's great for these kinds of events and the media to become involved, so that at least the population or the general public or civilians in these countries that are going to be affected will at least have some sort of knowledge and can form an opinion of their own, and that we can have more events like these and more awareness and advocacy and retaliation, if that's the right word, for this kind of industry to stop.
Okay. Anybody else wants to share thoughts?
There can never be enough, I think, outreach, awareness raising, sensitization. I actually worry sometimes about the media in the context of, we have 24/7 news, and there's the flavor of the day, and it's gone. And I think just this year alone, we had 5 global conferences or parties. So we went from climate change to endangered species to biodiversity, and then so it's challenging. But I think, as has been said earlier, we have to make this relevant to local communities, to individuals, to businesses. And it's not about giving a journalist a 30-page or 50-page or 100-page technical report on seabed mining and say, go create a story. We have to help provide the information that will then resonate with the public. So yes, media can do a lot more, but I think collectively we also have to help them be advocates for issues such as this.
I think one of the problems, right, has to do with just the nature of the subject matter. Deep seabed mining, what on earth is that? In addition to which, we're talking about the Pacific, Indian Ocean. I mean, this is so estranged from us. And in fact, I think discussion in Jamaica perhaps escalated when Jamaica signed a contract with deep seabed minerals. And then people are wondering, what's this contract about? So in terms of even media, it's not the news it's not news, unfortunately, as Chris is saying. And I think we need to find a way to have these matters on the agenda. I'm going to give you one simple example. How many of us actually know that Jamaica is an archipelago? Because we are still taught that we are an island. Right? That's what we are taught, that we are an island. We are not an island. We are an archipelago. We are an archipelago. That's not in any book that I've seen, really, and for primary schools. So how do you get this kind of information? How do you explain that? I mean, it's hard enough to explain climate change. That glaciers melting way across some other part of the globe is impacting sea level rise this part of the world. So I think that's the issue. And I think, as Chris says, we have to find a way to break it down and to determine its relevance. So we're talking about the relevance to youth, that's good. Then we are also going to talk about the relevance to gender, that's good too. But we have to find a way to make the information relevant and practically relevant. And I think that's what's missing from the discussion.
Right. I agree with you about the relevance, because I think that's a very critical component of, digesting information. But the reason we always will lean to the role of the media is that in a lot of contexts, and you did say something about, is it news, is that the media for a lot of us are validators of the information. The science, I think scientists are the first trusted communicators because the information, the facts come from them. And then there has to be a channel or tier through which the media will validate that knowledge. So in reality, you have entities like the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, you have organizations who will share information. But when you think about the larger society and the mainstream information repository, it is the media. So, for even, I'm from the country. If some of my family members don't hear certain things on TV and watch it from news, that is, they don't associate importance with certain issues. So I think that is why people are asking, why is it that the media isn't, why is it that we're not hearing some of these things? And I mean, there are a whole lot of factors as it relates to that, because sometimes perhaps you have opinion pieces that people might not be reading. But I think that is where the issue lies. We want to have some sort of mainstream representation for these conversations so that the general public can say, this serious, But on that note, I want to also link it back to something that Lalita mentioned about these issues being estranged from us. So when we're going to go out to the country, to other schools, we see Old Harbour High here, and the whether the younger demography or the persons who are not in line with this conversation, the relevance. Why must they care about deep sea mining? What does this mean? Does this have implications for fishing community, for leisure activities? Robin, they mentioned that you're a scuba diver. If the panel can give us some practical, if they exist, some of the ways that, for us to better understand the implications. Let us hear some more about this.
All right, so I could help with that. We've been talking about deep sea mining for a number of months now, and that's why I want the question of where is the media is important, because when a small group like ours tries to permeate the culture, it's very hard and long going. So yeah, let's talk about what can happen for you in terms of the deep sea being mined. So we don't really know exactly, to be honest. There's simply not enough information. But what we can project is already frightening to us. So if you're imagining mining on land, and a lot of us here would be familiar with it, Jamaica has huge repositories of mining happening all over the island. I'm from St. Anne. It's happening a lot there too. If you've ever been around it, ever known anyone from that community, from those communities, you'd know that how the dust settlement alone is enough to get people out of their homes. It's enough to, give people asthma, give people conditions that they didn't have before. So the money that they give them to relocate doesn't even cover any of the health issues that they have, all of the issues with their household that they have. Now imagine that in the sea. So you know that the particles of air are much further apart. Now the particles of water are closer together. So when you hear the noise from mining on land, imagine that in water with the particles closer vibrating. All of you from Old Harbour under the some amount of science, say, is going to carry the sound much farther and much louder. The animals around there can't live in that environment. There are animals that rely on, well, all of us, even as humans, we rely on speech, but they rely on sonar communication. Whales are so precious that within families they would have like something, if it was comparable to ours, it would be like each family having their own dialect. Like, the sound of your mother different from any other mother in there, and that's how they usually migrate together as a family. So we're looking at whales just dying out, not being able to travel for their safety, not knowing where their families are. Tuna also communicate sonarly. Then the dust that I was talking about, when it's in the air, it may take it will be there for months. People, like I said, the respiratory issues. But in the water, it takes so much longer for things to settle. So if you have those dust particles, you mentioned plumes, that's what we call them. They're being released back into the water after they take up the sediment from the bottom of the ocean. They separate out the minerals and they put back down the sand. The water is going to be murky for years to come because it won't settle for years to come, and it will be a large area that you could potentially see from space, based off of the area that they want to mine. How the ocean operates is just fundamentally different from on land. So it's really hard for us to know, but these are some of the projections.
All right, Chris, can you share with us some of?
Yes, certainly, and I. When we first talk about ocean, I think fundamentally it's one ocean. We're talking, we're not going to be so impacted by deep sea mining because they haven't started talking about trying to find out what's going on in the Caribbean Sea or close to our islands. The reality is it is one ocean, and therefore whatever activity is done, wherever it is done, within the ocean, it's going to affect the services and the support that oceans provide. But picking up from your question, yes, it's about day-to-day fishing livelihoods. It's about tourism. It's about coastal development, coastal communities, coastal protection. It's about the new opportunities that we may not even know are there that we are jeopardizing through an activity that potentially could impact on things like the blue economy, which we are talking about. There's some estimates that have indicated that over 100 million people within the Caribbean depend on the Caribbean Sea right now, either directly or indirectly through jobs and so on, and that the Caribbean Sea is generating over US $400 billion for our region. If we jeopardize that, what's the alternative? And if we jeopardize that, as was said, there may be no recovering from it. Some of those effects are potentially irreversible. So I think that's the sort of messaging, perhaps, so that it really comes down to, this will affect me. It will affect my opportunity as a young person now to have a livelihood and to generate, some form of long-term sustainability.
All right.
If I could add on the day-to-day, because thanks for that. So when these sea animals migrate from, you said one ocean, when they migrate from another region to ours, we could potentially have a lot more invasive species. If you remember when the lionfish came to the Jamaican waters and were eating off our parrotfish, and we had to try to eat as much of the lionfish as we could because they didn't have any predators, any natural predators that we knew of. So our waters are relatively safe. I go to the beach every morning to exercise and I never have to worry about sharks, for example. So, there are just things that we wouldn't be used to, or recreation could be different. Everything could be different. We don't know what could happen. So we're just saying the effects we know are going to be far-reaching. We just don't know what they will be.
When you follow the conversation on deep sea mining here and otherwise, that's a very common, a repeated theme. We don't know what's going to happen. And I'm happy that we have a legal luminary, if I may say so, on the panel, because some of what you mentioned, Alita, I think it also emphasizes how much we need to understand of the regulator and the decision-making processes and better understand the role of the ISA. And that has also been a concern. I would have spoken to a colleague within SOA Caribbean who had the privilege of being among some of the discussions at the International Seabed Authority. But in speaking on behalf of young people and the public, there is this concern that not just the SOA representatives shared, but overall the lack of transparency in the decision-making processes. So the deliberations happening at the ISA, from what we gather, it's sort of closed door, or just, for the member states. So when we don't understand the processes of decision making, isn't there that kind of implication for how we understand what will come from the deliberations?
Okay, I think it's a very good question, but my response to that is this. Chris said it. The ISA is not a group of people who work there. I mean, that's the staff that runs the entity. The ISA, you have the assembly, you have the council. So your assembly is all the states parties, your council are select members depending on groups in terms of the region. You have committees that have been established, your legal and technical commission, which are another group of legal and technical experts that look at these issues. So in terms of information, I think the states parties have a responsibility to the citizens. And I think maybe even a forum like this, and I'm not sure how you actually do the lobbying, and whether or not you do the lobbying to the entity that represents the state at these meetings. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure the extent to which that information actually comes out of what are the decisions. Because, and the reason I'm saying this is this. The documents for the ISA are actually online. So reports from the committees, they're online. You can see them. But who is going to just go online and say, let me see what were the decisions of the council at the last sitting? But your state party, the government that represents us, I believe that there's a responsibility from that end to apprise us, as well as to become part of the sensitization, especially given the global dialogue, and especially given the role now of our young people who have taken it onto themselves to say, this thing may appear extraneous, but I'm gonna deal with it because I know that in the future it's going to affect me. But you don't know the extent to which it's going to affect you, so you want the information, and I think there's a role for that. And I also want to, again, champion the cause, because we know, and Chris and I will tell you, in the area of environmental management, NGOs are critical to the discussion. Because in a sense, what you're doing is that you're representing the voiceless. You're representing us. But you also talk about the biodiversity, you talk about the whales. I mean, so that's giving voice to the voiceless. So you actually, we live in a space in which we are the dominant, we are the dominant species. And we are actually the only species that can articulate our causes. So somebody has to do it on behalf of those that cannot speak. And that's also a dialogue. You mean to talk about rights of nature. So in all the dialogue, there's still this rights of nature issue that you're talking about. That's what you're talking about. And I just want to also remind us of one thing. And it may not so much apply to deep seabed mining because it's an area beyond national jurisdiction, but also remember that even when we do the comparison with land mining, I'm not endorsing it, but remember there's also this notion of a right to development, meaning that each country as a sovereign state has the right to development. What that means is the country has a right to pursue its development paradigms. Our role as citizens is to interface with that role. So therefore, whatever is happening nowadays, we talk about mining. Why are we mining on land? Is it because we need it for export? Is it because we need jobs? What is it that we do? Why are we doing it? Why are we quarrying? Why do the mountains disappear? Because you're quarrying. Is it for the construction industry because you need housing? Is it because you need to eradicate poverty because there's also an international obligation to eradicate poverty? So I'm saying the discussions are important. The difference perhaps between this one is that there are so many uncertainties regarding deep seabed mining that the discussions are warranted and necessary, and we need answers. But when we discuss environmental management and degradation and resource management, we have to understand that dialogue as well. We love to drive on the highway, right? But what was there before? Where did the birds go? Have we thought about that? But we know that we have cut the distance between Kingston and St. Anne. We take less than an hour. That's to our advantage. But how much of the natural resources have we disadvantaged because of? So when we talk about deep seabed mining, we have to also think about it in that larger context because it is a reality. And we are the constant in the dialogue. We are the ones that demand all these things that we really don't need. So in essence, when we discuss it, we have to discuss it in a wider context and understand what is our role. When I get up every morning to do my personal business, what is my role towards climate change? What is my role towards deep seabed mining? What do I do? Some matters we know need to come from the state, right? It has to be almost like state initiated. Not because we are complying with our terms at the international level, because the state needs to do something. But at the end of the day, what is our responsibility? And what do we really want? Do I need 3 cell phones? There's something in this battery that's hazardous. And when I get rid of it, it's hazardous waste. Do I care? Maybe not. But we should care. And so I'm saying this is a discussion that I would say you need to pursue the discussion. And you need to perhaps take your placards in other places. And you perhaps need to engage the media.
Right.
And help to break down the information.
Okay. So I can answer some of your questions in terms of who we reached out to and who we involved. We wrote an open letter to the Office of the Prime Minister and to the Ministry of Finance, who are the representatives sitting in the meetings with the international. Yes. Foreign Affairs. MFAT, that's who we wrote it to. We received a response from MFAT, but not one from the Office of the Prime Minister. Senator Fraser-Binns also had a meeting with us, and we were able to raise our concerns. We're still looking for more transparency, however, because we weren't able to meet with. It was only Senator Fraser-Binns who really sat down and met with us. Another group that we work with, JET, also required the contract between Jamaican government and Blue Minerals Jamaica and Verdant Knight. So the question of transparency is that we definitely need more of it, including in the meetings with the International Seabed Authority, because why is it closed door when any other UN meeting, UN General Assembly, any other UN body meeting allows for, say, around 15 delegates to sit in on the meeting and non-governmental delegates. So on top of the governmental bodies of each country that signed on, civil society groups can with ease access these meetings. We weren't able to do that for the meetings with the ISA. We were outside protesting with our placards. We weren't allowed inside. So that's the question. If you are asking where are the voices of the youth, what are we doing? We're out here. We're just not given the access that we need. So in terms of what can we do, we're continuing the discussion. This is part of it, yes, but we've also had our podcasts, several blogs, several lives, Twitter chats, Twitter spaces, and we've always discussed in it what is our role. And it's one of the questions on the panel today, and it's one of the questions that we've always had whenever we've talked about this issue. That yes, we need to use less, produce less, and also reuse and aim towards a circular economy, because if we are throwing away, you say we don't need 3 phones. I've had one for 2 years and I intend to keep it until it broke down. But once I'm finished with it, how is it recycled? How is it, we have a lot of those metals that we're going to mine right now. We have a lot of it that needs to be recycled already. So what we're looking at is a new industry, and not the new industry of deep seabed mining, the new industry of the recycling industry. That's what we need to look forward to for our future.
All right, so let me just plug though, even though I know our audience is tuned into this discussion, based on the time allotment, we will soon have to transition so that our audience can also have a live engagement with you, our panelists.
No, I just wanted to say that NGOs are actually observers in the ISA. You actually have NGOs, so maybe it's a discussion you want to have. But they're actually NGOs in the meetings. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay.
I just wanted to add really quickly that yes, the ISA and so on is made up of all these member states and all these delegates, but the important part is that we, Jamaica, we have a voice, and we have that opportunity to voice our concerns. Why are these decisions being made for us? Why are we, the general public or NGOs, why are you outside? Why are you not inside making these decisions or helping to build these opinions and, see the bigger picture? A part of SOA Caribbean's mission right now is to actually have some youth stakeholders in the ISA, just so that we have more youth voices, so that we can, as I said, see the bigger picture and get to what we need to get to. Why is it that, as I said, these decisions are being made for us and, we are not a part of that discussion? As a matter of fact, I was reading an article the other day that batteries can actually be made from crustacean shells. So the lobster tails that we eat and the crab legs that we eat, we just throw away the shells. The chitin in the crustacean shells, when mixed with zinc and I think some other compounds, they can be made into biodegradable electrolytes. Why aren't we, looking for more innovative and creative ways to produce what you say we need? Why is it that we need to go and extort and explore this ecosystem that we know so little about? Why not push those funds or that kind of attention in that renewable sort of way? So it is food for thought. It's things that we need to think about. As I said, and as Xavier has said as well, the youth voice is actually very important in these meetings, and I just think it's unfair that these decisions are being made for us and we're not included in the discussion.
All right. Thanks for that, Robin. So the penultimate question before we throw to the audience, because I'm interested in hearing what you have to say or ask. And you all, did I say you preempted it? Because you did, talking about the production and consumption. We're there right now about deep sea mining being touted as a means of driving the renewable industry. So we understand that the proponents of deep sea mining are saying that in order for us to mitigate against climate change, the materials, the polymetallic nodules, aren't you proud of me, Geshan? The polymetallic nodules that we're going to dive after, this is the answer to create the batteries, solar technology, smart devices, all of that. We're going to have to dig up the ocean to get this. So what are your responses as it relates to the justification for deep sea mining?
Maybe I can start on that, and I think it's really important for us to understand why is there this growth and this interest and this demand for mineral deposits in the seabed. I think helping to understand that helps us to position ourselves to respond. And we have to recognize that we have overexploited on land. That's where it started. And, you know, copper, nickel, aluminum, manganese, zinc, lithium, all of the heavy metals that form part of these manufacturing processes, we've overexploited them on land and now thinking, where shall we go next? And the deep sea is there. So, yes, the demand for these, as was said, I think it's inherent. The same minerals that we are talking about, wind turbines, as you mentioned, solar panels and batteries. And it's a little strange because it's like these normally are considered good things. This is part of our renewable energy, climate change adaptation. But is deep sea mining the only choice that we have as it relates to minerals? And I think that as we are promoting things like a sustainable blue economy and sustainable development, we also, and I fully agree, we also have to look at that aspect of consumption. We have to look at that aspect of circular economy. And circular economy is a very simple thing. Let's use less raw material. Let's repurpose and reuse the raw material afterwards so we don't need to keep looking for new sources of material. Let's encourage our research. And this, I know, is a lot of scientists. Our researchers in finding alternatives to what, and we heard an example here. We have a fantastic, the human race is very adaptable and can develop once positions are taken that we no longer have this material, what's the alternative? And often solutions are found that are less. So I think that has to be developed, that has to be encouraged, that has to be promoted as viable alternatives to simply further exploitation and further degradation of our natural resources.
All right, Davia. So remember, we're winding down now, so you can go ahead.
The thing is, I am all for development. I'm all for the advancement of technology, everything. As Lalita mentioned, you know, we do have that right. But at the same time, you know, at what cost? What is it costing us? Why are we going to explore into this deep, unknown kind of territory to produce the same things that we already have? For example, I know there's so many of us out here, we have, for example, a set of headphones, and then one ear stops working, and then the other ear stops working. So these things do have a shelf life. These things are temporary. So why are we going to cause irreversible, permanent damage for something that is so temporary? Because if your phone stops working right now, you're going to go and you're going to buy a new one. And, you know, it comes down to waste and hazardous waste and stuff like that. So why are we doing this? Food for thought.
All right. So
I would just like to add that it also it speaks to how these things are produced, because they can be built to last longer. So a lot of this, we're putting it on the consumer, but a lot of this is on the producer. It's how things are set up for us to be able to buy and spend. So it's something that needs to be changed within our society itself. Do we need that many cars when we could have a fully functioning public transportation system? We don't. Also, when you're asking if do we need it for renewable energy industry, these polymetallic nodules take millions of years to form. So they are essentially a non-renewable resource. So can we mine a non-renewable resource to fuel the renewable energy industry? Does it make sense? It doesn't to me. Then there's the fact that a lot of they're trying to create the battery systems for these renewable energy industries, and there are a lot of promising discoveries and inventions that don't include any of these metals. So what is it really for? So that's the question that I would like to ask.
all right. So as we wind down, I want to pose this question to Lalita, but if any other panelists would want to respond afterwards, you are open to do so. Doing so. We want to talk about liability as it relates to adverse effects or misconducts that will occur in areas to be mined. Are countries that sponsor a company liable for the actions of said company? So even in the case of Jamaica, if they grant the sponsorship to Blue Minerals and something should happen, yeah, we want to better understand some of the legal ramifications of
Thank you. So each contractor has a contract with the ISA, and each contractor needs a country, a state party, to sponsor that contractor. So again, there's an arrangement between the contractor and the state, which is called the sponsoring state. So of course, as I said before, we are not on the cruises. That's what we actually call the activities on the ocean. You go to on the cruise, at a cruise ship. So, that's where you get your information, etc. So when it comes on to exploitation, we are not on the ship. So you're actually relying on the contractor who has a contract with very clear terms that are enforceable by the ISA, okay? But at the end of the day, because the sponsoring state has sponsored this contractor, the sponsoring state's obligations as well is to ensure the contractor is complying with the terms of the contract. So, of course, there are risks, but all the risks are not passed on to the sponsoring state. But you did ask a critical question about the taxpayers. Clearly, any government spending is taxpayers' money, okay? So at the end of the day, the discussion is important because as taxpayers, we need to assess the risks that the government has engaged in to enter into these arrangements, hence the need for information.
Agreed. Okay, any last thoughts before we throw to... All right, so we're going to transition. So we all have our part to play, and we've heard a lot from our panelists. Please give them a round of applause for the insights and the contributions. And now we want to hear from you, our audience. What are your questions, your concerns, your comments on what has been tabled or what you haven't heard? Because, of course, the discussion extends beyond the seated experts here. And we have a hand in the audience. I'm going to ask, do we have any extra microphones? Let's have the interaction. Let's borrow. Okay. So, wow, I did not see that all afternoon. So there's actually a mic stand in the center of the aisle here for those of us who want to ask a question. So, all right.
Okay. Well, my name is Jose. I'm actually a delegate of the delegation of Costa Rica to the ISA. And I have no specific question, just some comments. First of all, just say that thank you for organizing this. I think it's very important that we have discussions, awareness about deep sea mining. Also, I agree with a lot of what has been said. And maybe just wanted to introduce and make some comments on the last question that it was done about the liability. Those just for information, those are actually things that are ongoing negotiations. There are many risks on the liabilities of the companies that do seabed mining. Actually, it's one of the topics that it's going to be discussed in next sessions. Probably the most important, which is something that it should be really have awareness, is that, and it's just the beginning of the liability, is a sponsorship. The sponsorship and the companies have been, and sorry about my English if I can't express very well, but they dissolve through other countries. So they can have a mother company that owns an intermediary company that at the end, the one in in a very small country with just basically a non-capital or just what we call a shelf company is the one. It's the one that that actually gets the sponsorship, and that has to be solved with the concept of those line of tracking down that the ISA is using. Currently, ISA is actually using not very modern one, but at the same time, we have to be aware that there hasn't been awarded any exploitation contract yet. That's something that, it a little bit relaxes. I mean, not relaxes in the same that we need to have all those regulations very well determined for the moment that we will actually have exploitation. However, and I'm sorry, I'm just doing some comments. I don't want to take a lot either. About the transparency is a very important thing within the ISA. For example, Costa Rica has spoke a lot about it. In my opinion, it goes more beyond about closing doors, and it's how really internal processes have been conducted, how real results are being spread to the members, and those internal processes can impact basically all of the duties of the ISA. So if you research down over there, you will find a lot of things. However, at the same time, I have to say that progress have been made on those situations. Sessions of the ISA can be web streamed every time. Actually, until last year, we have informal groups, and the informal groups, there was a movement of not web streaming those. I have to say that I have the honor of being of the delegation that actually just actively request for those informal groups to be web transmitting. And I encourage you all, because you can see live what it's being said. You can see live what it's being discussed, and you can be just seeing the same as a delegate is seeing. You just have to go to the ISA website, web stream, and you can see that. And just for last, I think everything comes down in two things. The Article 145 of UNCLOS indicates very well that mining can be done if we protected the marine environment from any harmful effect. So we need to make sure that all the regulations comply with that, and that's a mandatory. It's not a balance. You can do this until you guarantee about the harmful effects, protection from harmful effects. But there is not enough scientific evidence of deep sea. So how can we proceed about that? Well, legally talking about, there's the precautionary principle, principio precautorio in Spanish, and it's just like basically a holding because you're not sure if you're going to do some harm, and that's something that it's been legally developed in many countries. Costa Rica is currently supporting within the ISA a precautionary pass, which is we acknowledge that there is a mandate to develop the regulations. We are over there participating in all the discussions, but because of that lack of scientific evidence, we think there must be a pause until we have enough scientific evidence to continue with the actual granting or awarding of a contract. So just wanted to let you know about my country's position a little bit, and thank you very much. Sorry to extend a lot, but thank you for this event.
Thank you very much, and No apologies for that contribution. I think they're very useful additions, and I think that's the purpose of having conversations, because no one person can carry all the perspectives, and I think it was a very useful and valuable addition. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanchez. All right, do we have any other questions or comments for our panelists? No, everyone just digested. All right, Felix.
Hi. So, in November, when is the next round of negotiations? March? In November, we did protest outside. You know how many people showed up? 4. 4 people showed up to the protest, and this is something that affects, what does it affect? Like existence on Earth? Right. 4 people showed up. It makes me question why Jamaica was chosen, because Jamaica doesn't have a protest culture. And then, I don't want to create any sort of conspiracy, but it makes you think, why is there anything behind that? That why Jamaica? Why did they choose such a nation that's preoccupied with other things? If this was maybe a first world country, people would be more on the street, but not even that. Latin America, oh my God, it would be hectic. So there's that. And then, if we are to protest again in March, I want to ask anybody who's an observer at the ISA, so Lalita perhaps, who is it that we need to get the message out to? What do you think would be a more effective way to protest? And if, say, today we were to instead, because protesting may not be the best way of protesting in person, protests on the street may not be the best way of protesting in this country. Say maybe we do take to social media or something. If we were to make messages today with the youth, record them, who should we aim for? Who should we address that to?
Thanks, Felix, if I may. We do have a protest culture, but not for that, right? So, interesting question. I think social media will be a good avenue. That's my view. Why Jamaica? Because Jamaica actually negotiated for the ISA to be here. So that's what we did. So that would have been a negotiation at that level. And so Jamaica was chosen for the International Seabed Authority. But it is clear to me that there must be a forum to be heard. It's unfortunate in terms of your experience protesting, and the fact that 4 people turned up. In fact, when I heard, I think I was in a meeting and as an observer, and I heard afterwards, it may be on the news, that they were, and I actually wrote to someone and said, Jamaicans are getting a wind of this thing because they actually is a group protesting. So I think it's a good start. Don't be disheartened. You have to start, I really spin it. Don't be disheartened. You have to start somewhere. And I think if you can manage to raise the awareness, and you see, for this, awareness has to be real. Again, as I said, it has to be real, and it has to be sustained. Because it's not a one-off event where you block the road or you have a protest because something has happened or is about to happen. This has to be sustained. So even the context of a protest has its place, but then maybe what we should be doing is more finding the way to raising awareness so that people understand it. It actually impacts me, and it's not just a thing. You know what I mean? And you guys know how to do the social media thing. Right, you know how to do it. So I think that's a good way to start.
Yes. Thank you so much, Felix, for that interjection, and I think it was very valid and very realistic contribution. And you mentioned about the awareness raising. I know the youth bodies are not short on ways to raise awareness and to build, but a very important thing that we need to consider is the willingness for other entities to have dialogue when requested. So just as how the young people could have invited you as experts in the room, there's a reason for that. They're not leading with their own opinions. There's a reason we have conversations with experts and persons who are close to subject matter to be guided. And we also request guidance for those entities who have the authority, who have the kind of context that are important, but there must be a willingness to have the conversations for us to move forward. Right, so I see someone else at the I was going to say podium. It's not. The microphone for our contribution. Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first of all thank you guys for having this session. I think it's very important that us as a nation get some insights onto what's happening with regards to seabed mining. My name is Hank Hedge, and I'm a geologist. I'm also a ISA trainee, which means I would have had experience at sea. I've spent a month out there in the Pacific looking at polymetallic nodules, cobalt-rich ferromanganese crust, and all these resources that we're now talking about. And so with that said, I have the experience, the hands-on experience. Also, as a geologist, I would have been exposed to on-land mining and mineral exploration. So to Old Harbor High School, big up. My first experience in metallics mineral exploration was just a few kilometers from your school in Bellas Gate. I don't know if any of you guys know Bellas Gate, but I did mineral exploration for gold and copper in Bellas Gate, and it has a rich history of historic mining from the colonial days. So I've seen remnants of mine sites, the shafts that are there, underground mining to be exact. I also did my master's in natural resource management, and Lalita is was my lecturer when I did environmental law. So I've listened to Robin, and I didn't get your name. Davia, right. So in listening to you guys, I realized that you guys are very passionate about the environment, and you guys need to protect it. We all need to protect it, right? You made mention about millennials being more considerate for the environment and these things, which is kind of contrary, because we love technology so much. We love traveling, we love motor cars. We get excited by these things, but where the resources come from? In order to manufacture these things, we need to mine, right? Nodules are like potatoes. Just think of this floor, and you drop a potato on the floor. And that's how you pick up the nodules. It's different from on-land mining, where you're excavating and digging up soils and all these things. So as regards to the sediment plume, that is the big concern for most environmentalists. We generate sediment plumes naturally from underwater volcanic eruption. Think about 2022, where Tonga experienced an underwater eruption, and it sent shock waves around the world, right? That's serious vibration that underwater mining can't produce. We have underwater landslides that also triggers sediment plume. We have dredging of the seafloor for ships to traverse, and these two produce sediment plumes. So I think that information needs to be sent out. Persons need to be aware of what's really happening. And let's look on the bright side. We have technology. We are more advanced. Human beings, we are more capable of doing more research in more details. And so if we are finding a solution to help our problems, and it's offshore, right, which means we would try to reduce the amount of land mining activities that are taking place. The carbon footprint for seabed mining is way less than on land. You need 2 vessels and a underwater vehicle that is gonna do like suction. It basically vacuums up the mineral off the seafloor, right? So it's not the heavy duty equipment the excavation and the crushing and all of those activities that you'd see on a mine site. And you spoke about St. Anne, right? So it's not like the bauxite mining. It's not like the limestone hill that you see we're quarrying. So we just need to be aware of these things. And before we go out there and misinform people, we try to get the full background information. And also, I'm a delegate of the Jamaica delegation to the International Seabed Authority, so I have been privy to the sessions, the meetings, and so it's a collective effort that, you know, all the member states, they're trying to ensure that we go about this the right way. And also, a lot of emphasis is placed on environmental management, right? A lot of emphasis is placed on monitoring. And as it regards to sponsoring states, we have a role to play in monitoring. So we have to ensure that once the vessel is out and they start doing the work, currently, Jamaica or Blue Minerals, I haven't heard anything about them doing any type of work at sea at the moment. So in that regard, there aren't any cruises going on. And also, the area that they speak about is not within our territorial waters. And I think with Papua New Guinea, it was within their territorial waters, their EEZ, that they had Nautilus doing mineral exploration. So I just want to, you know, share my knowledge with you guys, and thank you for having this session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and your contribution, Hank. I see Davia wants to generate a response to what was said.
All right, so just to clarify some of the points that you made, just so that it's not, what I said was not contorted. When I mentioned Papua New Guinea, I was not speaking to the differences of us being here and it being mined somewhere else, whereas in Papua New Guinea it was within their region. What I was referring to specifically is that Pacific Islanders have been fighting against this within their region, and where they're planning to mine is within the Pacific Ocean. So if the people that live there are against it, who are we as Jamaicans to get up and go near their region and do something like that? That to me sounds like the spirit of the colonizers that have oppressed us in the past. That's what I was referring to, not what you were saying there. In terms of you saying that it would be different on land and in the sea, I did say that it would be very different, yes. But what I was referring to with the plumes is that if you can imagine how the dust settles on land with the air particles, imagine how much slower, larger, how much more impact it is in the water where things take years to settle. That and the noise pollution would be greatly increased by simply by the material of the water. But I did mention that we do not know what the impacts will be. We just know that it will be far-reaching. So if that's a point of information for you, then that's different, because, as we say, we don't have the information. What I was speaking to were projections. Next is the creative argument that since the environment is doing it to itself, creating plumes through volcanic eruptions, then we have the right to do it too. That is some very creative whataboutism. I don't believe that we can do things simply because it's already there when we can minimize impacts instead of exacerbate it. Thank you.
If I could just add, basically piggybacking off of what Davia had said, you know, the hydrothermal vent eruptions and such, they are natural occurrences. We don't necessarily need to go and add to the problem that's already there. We don't need to do that. You had mentioned that, yes, nodules are like potatoes. We can go and pick them up, but a human can't physically go down and pick them up one by one and put them on the ship. We need the vehicles, as you had mentioned, and the vacuums, and that alone is just destructive in and of itself. There was an article that recently came out that the ghost octopus actually lays its eggs on polymetallic nodules. We're not sure why, but they do. If you go and pick them up and disrupt their eggs, these sea creatures that live so far down, they are slow to reproduce and they are slow to grow. So when you remove that kind of resource and those habitats for them, then where will they go? Where will they go? I hear your points, and I do agree that, the passion for the environment is important, but at the same time, at what cost? Why are we going to be doing this?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Just to add something, Tonga is a Pacific island, and they are the state that is pressing for seabed mining. Just want to add that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry, you had a... So you keep looking behind you. You were the only one standing. All right.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Odein McCoy, and I'm also a geologist, so I'm a colleague of Mr. Hedge. And I also did natural resource management as my master's degree, so Lalita Davis Mattis, she taught me environmental law as well. I don't really have a question per se, but more of a comment. What this underscores for me, this whole discussion about these seabed mine, what it underscores for me is the responsibility of the consumer. Now, we speak about all of these mining companies and so on, and we tend to attack them and all of these things, but I think I'm always conflicted because I work in the extractive industry, but I'm also pro-environment. So people always tell me that you can't be both, you have to be one or the other. And not to date myself here, but I heard that the Earth's population, it passed 8 billion last year. And since I've been a human being on the face of this planet, 3 billion more people have been added. That's 3 billion more mouths to feed, 3 billion more homes to build. Well, not necessarily 3 billion, but you get the picture. We all need resources to survive, and I think we need to look at the consumer culture first. Mr. Hedge had mentioned that as young people, we love technology. I mean, I have 2 cell phones. One is, I only have one. The other one was given to me by where I work, but I hardly use it. And, I have a partner, my partner and I, we always say, like, why do we need 2 vehicles, that sort of thing. And I think when I look at social media sites, I'm not really on social media as much anymore, like Instagram, for example. I see this influencer culture. There have been articles out there that speak to the fact that if everyone should live like a typical influencer does, like a nice home, a swimming pool, multiple cars, that sort of stuff, we would need another planet to live on. If everyone should live like an influencer. And I think with 3 billion more people added, I think it really starts in the mind and teaching people about these things. Environmental philosophy, like how people think about my use and my impact. So I know that a few of our panelists are environmentalists and they already have this sort of mindset. But I think it's important for us to teach the young ones especially that certain things we don't necessarily need. It's important to want wealth, but try to reduce your footprint. I think I really like the minimalist lifestyle. I wouldn't call myself a minimalist, but I try as best as possible to use what I need. And it's the same with mining. I am of the view that you should mine what you need, not necessarily all the things. So for jewelry, for example, I'm always a proponent of lab-grown gems. I'm always a proponent of recycling gold. And the few pieces of jewelry that I've purchased, not from me, but I've always looked at the footprint that creates. So I think it really does start with just the culture and teaching people that, hey, we need to reduce our footprint and not only looking at the companies, the big corporations. Capitalism doesn't exist only because of the corporation. The corporations wouldn't exist without us. There's planned obsolescence and there's perceived obsolescence. Why do I need to keep up with the Joneses? Why do I need to buy an iPhone every year? So, you know, and why do our companies always wanting new software that you can always buy more from them? So I think it really starts with the mind and teaching, especially those people involved in influencing others, that we need to reduce our footprint. So yeah,
thank you very much for that contribution and useful insights. I think, you know, we always encourage the different perspectives to form a healthy debate, and if I may say, both can be true at the same time. I don't know if we want to get trapped in a chicken and egg situation in terms of who do we target first, but I think, if anything, both of that can be addressed at the same time, the responsible consumerism as well as the role of mining companies and other commercial organizations. Gishan, I see you at the mic.
Yeah.
You're ready to shut it down.
Not shut it down at all, encourage it, because I'm glad that Hank came and Odin as well, both senior geologists.
Yes.
As a student of geology myself, I was starting to think that we were just preaching to the choir, so I'm glad that we got a diversity or an opposing view. I want to start by saying that I heard a term being used I don't particularly, enjoy, when we just write off this as just passion. We're not just here as passionate advocates. There are scientists in the groups. It's an existential crisis right now, right? Hank made mention that, there are underground landslides that disrupt and cause noise. Natural events that happen same on land, like the Sahara Desert plumes and earthquakes and stuff like that. But yet still we can quantify and qualify land-based mining as opposed to the effects of those natural events happening, right, on the natural habitats and natural environment. And so we will also be able to quantify and qualify those negative effects that we're still uncertain of, and the extent of those effects under and in an area we are unable to get to ourselves. We rely on robots and machines to get there. So we are still very much unable to know to what extent this will happen. And when it does happen, in terms of remediation, unlike land, where we can get to the land site and have it fixed or addressed, we won't be able to readily get to the deep sea to do that. Right? So there are real questions to be asked. Everything is not set in stone. I know that, the conversation of us needing these newer materials, and I think David did mention that there's a way outside of it. And just a disclaimer, as a geologist, I have worked in the industry in terms of exploration. I just need to make that clear. And sometimes I have also fought with this conflict of environment and us needing to develop through these ways, right? But as advocates or activists, we are not anti-development. We are saying there are options. We are pumping millions of dollars, and I'm so glad that Hank got the opportunity to spend this time offshore in the Pacific. It must have been great. But there are ways for us to do this, to spend millions of dollars into what David had said, into pumping these resources into a circular economy, into how we better be able to recycle the gold and the copper and the cobalt in the extra phone that Odin has. And when the phone stops working, where do we return it? Where do we send it to? And how do they extract the gold and the copper from our phones to make new phones? There are ways, there are options, and I don't think that we're exploring that enough, right? Again, we brought the conversation here at UA to have an open discussion where all views can contend, but I need to make it clear that as advocates, as people in their profession, disinformation, I don't think any of us here have presented any disinformation. It might not be to your liking, but it is there for us to go and verify it for ourselves, read multiple times as to the information that is out there on both sides. That's how we come to conclusions as persons who are well read or want to keep abreast of certain things, right? So I encourage the young people here, don't be disheartened, and don't just think that being an activist you have to have passion. It might just come down to the fact that your children and children will not be able to have an earth to live on, and that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you for all the contributions here, be it whether it doesn't matter, well, maybe it does, the side of the fence that you're on, but it's about a healthy debate, because of course that is how you learn more, you explore, and it pushes you, as Gishan said, to generate the verifiable information. And even linking back to the whole debate on deep sea mining, there isn't a conclusion to say no or yes. It's about exploring ways for us to better understand the implications before we do what we do. And we can accept the argument, as Gishan and others mentioned, about the alternatives, even to use the Jamaican adage, turn your hand, make fashion. Well, but there are lots more, and I do think, of course, there's room for us to invite as many perspectives on this issue as possible, and finding the ways to continue the conversation outside of this forum, which is just one of many. But I want to say thank you so much. I see that Senator Binns have to exit. We want to say thank you for being a patron to the event. We want to thank the representatives from the Costa Rican Embassy and also the Embassy of the United States for being here. Want to thank the organizers. I think I'm not doing the vote of thanks, but I want to also thank our panelists for the time. I think this has been an extended showcase, but very important. So many things to digest, and we must commit to ourselves to continuing the conversation and doing our own exploration of information as it relates to deep sea mining on all accounts. At this time, I am going to turn over to Emma Lewis. Or is it a change my mind? Emma, you ready for me, Emma? Sorry. Are you ready for me?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, so it has been a pleasure moderating this discussion, and I'm going to turn over to Emma, who will move the official vote of thanks.
Well, I'll try and keep this short and sweet, although there's so many people involved. It's been an amazing collaborative effort to pull this together. So I'm really proud of everyone for working together so hard and diligently. Many partners working with great determination to make this all work. So we're proud of you. First of all, I have to thank the audience for showing up. Students, environmentalists, scientists, policy experts, high school students, thank you for coming. And I was going to thank Senator Fraser Binns. She just left. She is, by the way, the opposition spokesman on land, environment, and climate change. And I would like to thank the diplomats who came. We're very grateful to you for attending and being patient with us and listening. And a special greeting to the representative from Costa Rica for his intervention. That was very interesting. Huge thanks to the University of the West Indies for hosting us, and special thanks to the Institute for Sustainable Development, Dr. Smith, Dr. David Smith, Center for Environmental Management, Dr. Vivian Vassell and June Barber, the Maintenance and Security Department, Mr. Archie and Mr. Norman Haywood, the Recruitment, Promotions and Communications Department, that's Renee McKenzie, somewhere around here, thank you. Campus Registrar Department, and the Principal of UWI Mona Campus, Professor Dale Weber. We really appreciated the academic oversight and support from the Life Sciences Department. That's Professor Mona Weber, who was unable to join us today, Dr. Aiken and Dr. Dwight Robinson. And the graduate students, Felix, Charnley, Rianne McKenzie, and Arthur Cole. You're all amazing, as you know already. The Faculty of Science and Technology, the departments and institutes, Department of Geography, Geology, and the Natural Products Institute. Having said that, I have to big up Greenpeace, our major sponsors, they've lent incredible support in like 1,000 different ways over the past few weeks as we've been planning. And Ms. Tanya Brooks is a senior communications specialist at Greenpeace USA, and she's also Jamaican, and she is wonderful and has been very encouraging and supportive throughout. We greatly appreciate our knowledgeable panelists. Thank you for taking time today, and you gave us lots and lots of food for thought. Our amazing moderator, Ms. Dana Lynn Swaby, Global Yardie, and to Mr. sorry, I pronounced his name wrong now. Gishon. I had it right before, but Gishon Johnson, thank you very much for your introduction, which gave us a really good overview. And Mr. Christopher Corbin, thank you. Davia, Robin, and Ms. Lalita Davis-Massis. We are very grateful to you all. A really fantastic sort of range of views and some really strong points they made, which gave us all a lot to think about, I think. Well, I love the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council. They're a fantastic group of activists. They care. They are a bit passionate sometimes, but you know they're also very focused and very well. They keep to their points and keep moving along. You know, they don't just do a bit of shouting and then be quiet. They just keep progressing in their message and in their advocacy, and I think that's very important. So we should all love and support them in everything they do. And they consist, well, partly, I'd like to highlight Eleanor Terrelong, who is administrative lady and very dedicated. Davia Hilton, of course, who's been doing everything, not just serving as a panelist. She's been doing all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. Gishon Johnson. For facilitating, and Rianne Mackenzie for being a great facilitator too. And we love the Sustainable Oceans Alliance Caribbean team. It's really wonderful to have that link and that support. Very important, very valuable partner. Congratulations, they had an art event recently, didn't you, in Trinidad on deep sea mining, which went really well, and an exhibition. I've seen a couple of reports about it. It looked absolutely great. So, and Khadija is part of that team, and our panelist, Robin Young. So thank you, and thank you for all the great work you do. The Institute of Jamaica has provided all kinds of support as well, really fantastic logistical support. The National Museum of Jamaica, the PR Development Department, the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, and last but not least, the staff of the Natural History Museum of Jamaica, led by the awe-inspiring Eartha Cole. I don't know where she is, but anyway, she's been fantastic in the education department. And the Jettas, Jamaica Environment Trust, have been very supportive. They're always there for our environment. So we want to thank Teresa Rodriguez Moody and Lauren Creary at JET. The power of the WhatsApp group, I must say, is quite remarkable. And not in a negative way, but very positive. So our Action Against DSM WhatsApp group has been full on every day, all day, from early morning till late at night. And we're just everybody, all the partners, working together and collaborating. And that's what I'm very, very happy about myself personally. It shows knows that it can be done if you all work together. Our exhibitors, I want to thank them all for being here today, and take a look at all the booths if you haven't already. NEPA, UNEP, the Natural History Museum, the National Museum, the virtual reality over there, and the Climate Change Council, of course, and Sustainable Oceans Alliance Caribbean. I don't know if I've missed anybody. I hope not. Somebody already? That was pretty comprehensive. Sorry, a bit long. But I want to thank you all for being there, and thank the team who made this happen. I'm very proud of you. Thank you. We have some small tokens to give to our panelists, and what I would like to say is that we appreciate you far more than the small tokens might suggest. But anyway, it's something to wake you up in the morning. Let's say that. Coffee. Okay. Oh, there you go. It's being handed out to you. All right. Good Blue Mountain coffee, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Emma. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for coming to such a riveting conversation on deep sea mining. And you've been a great audience, loyal audience. And to treat you, we do have some refreshments at the back. Please indulge yourselves. Take care.